week we have none. Now we have a lot. I'm happy. This is great. Today's story, we know who we're talking about, right? That doesn't change for a long time yet, does it? It's called A Miracle. And I thought coming up here to church, we had snow, and then as we got back closer to the church, the roads were icy, right? Well, this is the story, and you all know it, is when Sister White crossed the Mississippi. We know that story, don't we? We're just going to have to hear it again, though, because it's the next one in the series, okay? It's kind of hard for me to understand, but I don't know how they did it back then. Just can't imagine in my mind. But Sister White and James and two other guys were there, and they were preaching. And they just finished. And what are they telling everybody about now? What is the latest that they're talking about? What commandment are they talking about? The fourth, that's right. Because they just found out that what is the Lord's Sabbath day, right? So they're telling everybody. Well, they finished here, and they had to go. And the Lord has told Sister White that she had to go to Iowa. And this was in the winter. Now, to us, we would say, okay, we'll check and see how the roads are. We'll just go to Iowa, okay? But they didn't travel that way, did they? No. How did she travel to go to Iowa? Yeah, it was the horse of the sleigh, because we're talking winter now. So when they got done, it had been raining and there was mud. And I know a sleigh might go in mud, but not as well as in snow. So they went to bed that night, and it was raining, and Sister White could hear it raining. And she was praying, Lord, you want me to go to Iowa? We have to have snow for the sleigh to go on. And it just kept raining. She'd get up, and finally, a little bit before dawn started cracking, it quit raining. She looked, and that white stuff's coming down. Don't you love to see that? I do, even. Sometimes the big flakes come down first, and then it goes. Well, the ground was so muddy, they had to want more snow. So they couldn't leave right away. About 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the guy said, okay, we can go in the sleigh. Now, I don't really know. You know, Gary and I were old, but we don't understand when you get in a sleigh, how do you stay warm? I mean, they don't have to have a heater, do they? And here we were in a car, and if our heater rigs, we're like, ooh, rats, you know? I don't know if they heat bricks or what they do, but this was an open sleigh that Sister White was in. And so I just can't imagine how they travel like this. I'm sorry. I mean, if it's snowing down on them, they're going to get wet, you know? But anyway, they left at 5 o'clock at night, and they went a few hours, and they always knew where all the Sabbath keepers were so that they could go and spend the night with them. And we'd open our house to anybody. Wouldn't we like that? I would, whether you knew them or not. And, hey, you're a Sabbath keeper, you're an Adventist, come on in, you know? And so that's how they traveled. So then they went to bed that night. They made it there. They looked out, and it was still snowing. Now the snow is so deep. The next day they get into a sleigh, and the horse goes pulling them down. Sometimes they get into snowdrifts. I don't think they have horse plows there that go in front of things like they do on our highways today, do you think? No. So the guys would have to get out of the sleigh with the little shovel, and then the horse would go on through. Every time they come to snowdrift, that's what they had to do. They were going 200 miles. I just can't see how they did that. But then they would spend the night, the next morning get up and get back in the sleigh again. And then sometimes it would start to rain like it does here, and then it turns to snow, and they would go. Okay, and then they were like 4 hours, and they had to cross, what river would that be? Mississippi, that's right. And so they got there, and they stayed in a hotel, and what starts happening that night? It started to rain. Sister White heard it in the morning, and she woke up, and she goes to everybody, wake up, we've got to get down to the river. It's starting to rain, and if it starts to rain, the river won't be frozen, and that won't work out too good.
Unless you want to drown.
Yeah, and they didn't really want to do that, did they? So they got down there, and they was asking people around, do you think we can go across? Do you think it's frozen enough? And they're like, no, I don't think it's frozen enough. I don't think so. And they're like, well, and one guy said, okay, the children of the Israelites, they had faith. They put their feet in the water, and they went across. The Red Sea's parted. let's just put our horse's hoofs in the water and see what happens, because it was about a foot of water on top of solid ice of the Mississippi River. So the horse went down, and the horse was splattering, and the water came almost underneath the sleigh, it said, and I don't know how many inches that would be till the sleigh hits that, and they started out. Of course, we know they're all praying, right? We know this. And there was people on the banks on both sides seeing them coming over, and they're like, they just wanted to watch the ice go apart, and then down would go the sleigh, the horse and Sister White and everybody, right? But they kept praying, and pretty soon the horse just slugged right along and went up the bank, and they was praising the Lord really big time then, just like the children of Israelites when they got on the other side. They were just praying and praying. But Sister White knew then they still had a 2-day trip before they got to Iowa, where they were supposed to go. Now they had to go to Iowa because the Lord told them that John Andrews was there. Remember John Andrews? We heard about him before. And he was sick, and he went to stay with his father. And they had written back to people back east saying, come out here. The land is cheap, it's good land, and you can make lots of money here. So John Andrews went out there because his father was there and he was sick. But he started working in his uncle's store. So then he wasn't preaching. What's another family that we know that was preaching and his first name is John? Sarah knows this name. I know you do. Yes, dear? That's right. And he went out with his wife because his wife was kind of like Lot's wife. She didn't like being a preacher's wife too well because, you know, you don't know where the next loaf of bread's coming from or the flour. You don't know where you're going to be spending the night. So when she got her husband to go out there and they bought property, and he was a good carpenter, well, he was making money too. And so they knew that this was not right. Now, what's the text you're going to read us today?
For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
So what does it say about the love of money? Not good. Money's good if you help other people with it, and that's what we're supposed to do. So she knew she had to get to talk to these two Johns, right? So they had to keep going, and it just kept snowing, and the horse and buggy just kept going, the sleigh. And finally, they got to where they was almost supposed to be. And they spent their last night. They knew the next day she was going to go to the town. Didn't know how the Lord is going to have to work this out. But when they pulled up to the town, and Andrews and Loughborough came out to see her, it said that it was a colder atmosphere there than what they had crossing the Mississippi River. So they knew as soon as they saw Ellen White, they're like, and then their mind starts thinking, you know, I did work up until about 5 minutes before sundown, and I did hurry out 5 minutes before the sun was really down, and they wasn't watching the edges of the Sabbath, were they? So Ellen White just looked at them, and they just looked at her. They offered them a place to come in to stay, but they were like, oh dear. And Elijah just looked at Loughborough, and she said to him, what doest thou here, Elijah? She didn't have to preach a sermon on that one, did she? And he just looked at her. And he let them go in their house and spend the night. And next Sabbath is going to be when Jesus comes into their heart, like he comes into our hearts. Okay? Thank you. You need this one. You need this one because you see.